The record date is September 27th, 2007. The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Mediacom Channel 15 on Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Again, it comes on Wednesday evening at 9:30. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. My telephone number is 515-276-3956 here in the Des Moines area. And John's number is also 515-282-2672. With me at the controls is my co-host.
And who are you?
Oh, Don Burgmaier
Okay.
from Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay.
And who are you, speaking in the background?
Okay. Co-host John Harvey. Welcome to the CPI report. It's been a while since we've run our live programs, but we trust that you enjoyed hearing from people like Dick Woods and others who have joined us in past occasions. Sometimes we're forced to do reruns simply because the time and effort that it takes to put together a new program is fairly significant. And so we hope that you enjoyed those programs that we thought were fairly well done in the past. One of the long-time guests on our program, so long time that he soon no longer became a guest but a regular on the CPI report, is a fellow by the name of Terrance Walker. Terrance Walker has a love of liberty, that is when he can manage to get some of it, has a love for freedom, has a love for the Constitution. And sometimes those desires of his to maintain and to encourage freedom and liberty are greatly frustrated. We've talked to Terrance in just last few minutes, and it seems as though he has come across a few frustrating moments. So for right now, let's hear what Terrance has to tell us about the system of justice as he finds it in this neck of the woods.
Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate you. You're always kind with your introductions for me. And yes, I am Terrance Walker. I'm the judge of the judges, self-proclaimed, but nonetheless, I've got to fill a void that there is here in Iowa, because you don't see too many people speaking out against the justice system, and in particular, you don't see anybody of color speaking out against the justice system on TV here in Iowa, especially.
Wouldn't be prudent.
Wouldn't be prudent. And plus, a lot of the figureheads don't really want to rattle any cages or to jeopardize any of their pockets of money that they get from grants and things of that nature. So here I am. I don't earn any money for this, but I believe that right is right, and I'm going to speak my mind on it. And hopefully Iowans can understand. I wanted to delve into the justice system. We typically talk about judges, but a lot of times when it comes to criminal matters that are come before a judge, those initiate through contact, personal contact by the filters that present these cases to the judges or that initiate these cases and present them to the prosecutors, and then they go through to the judges and through the justice system. Now, we've got to deal with the fact that here in Iowa, we've got the highest percentage per capita imprisonment of black people in any state, and that's been the statistic on and off. Iowa's been in the top 10 for numerous years, and I think it just takes speaking about the issue to shine some light on it. Hopefully, it may go away if people care enough to address the issue and actually do something about it. And I wanted to talk about, as it pertains to the justice system, I wanted to talk about the police force and their interactions with the neighborhood and how this phenomenon, highest percentage per capita imprisonment of black males, can come to pass. A lot of times when you have interactions with police, if those police are not well versed in the culture or in the neighborhoods that black people dwell in, and they're not familiar and appreciative of those, our people, basically, there can tend to be. I could see how the police could tend to arrest and present more cases in which black people are a part of to the criminal justice system, therefore creating this phenomenon that we have here in Iowa, the highest percentage per capita imprisonment of black people here of any state in the union. And you would think that this would probably be more reflective in the southern state, where there are there's more of a history of discrimination and outright actions of where blacks have been targeted. But we're in Iowa. We're in good old North Iowa, corn country. How could this phenomenon come to be? Well, I think it's time to shed light on one article here we see in City View. Came out a couple weeks ago. Can you show that article, cover that article that I got? And I'll go through a couple examples, and maybe we can address why this phenomenon tends to be. Recently we've got a officer, a former police officer, that was elected, or not elected, but promoted, I should say, to the position of chief of police. Her name is Judy Bradshaw. And I do think it's commendable that Des Moines is open-minded enough and progressive enough to have a woman as a cop, chief of police cop, top cop. And I think, given her hard work, she deserves that title. However, I do have problems with her tactics and what the officers under her promulgate in their actions. The City View article states that on the first day, Judy Bradshaw introduced the Neighborhood Enforcement Strike Team, a group of officers from across the department used to stem a recent tide of crime, including homicides in the River Bend and Drake neighborhoods, as well as a shooting at Martin Luther King Jr. Park. In a few weeks, Nest arrested more than 200 suspects, including 60 felons and a whole host of people wanted on warrants. Now, the article doesn't go on to state what those specific crimes were and whether or not a lot of those warrants, those numbers were indicative of anything that had transpired in previous years during that time frame. But I do suspect this, since these neighborhoods that they were patrolling which I actually work in and I'm in a lot. I've got my business in. I do suspect that a high percentage of these people were black, for one. For two, I do suspect, given my experience as a black man, and in especially dealing with law enforcement, that I do suspect that some of these crimes could have came as a result of merely arguing with the police. Um, I have seen over the past couple of months uh, a great deal of people pulled over um, at any given time, uh, going up and down either University or MLK, uh, wherever you would be in this neighborhood where these nest officers were patrolling. I do, however, have an incident which happened to me, which kind of highlights my concerns as it pertains to this nest and these actions of implementing some sort of task force to stop crime. And I do think that it's probably a good concept to stop crime, good idea. I have to disagree with some of the methodology because, like I said, that the police interaction tends to result in the final result of the criminal justice system being loaded more so with black people, especially black males. So let me just highlight one incident which kind of concerns me. And I wrote a formal letter to this to the uh, police officer standards uh, office and the not only the city council but also the sheriff's department and the board of supervisors here in Polk County. This is dated August 24th. I'm writing to address and complain some inappropriate and unconstitutional actions on the part of a police officer and a sheriff's deputy. If these actions reflect a larger policy on the part of both the police department and the sheriff department, I'm writing to address that too. Let me start by stating that I'm a local businessman who's been in business for several years. I don't get into trouble. I'm a single parent with a child to raise. While driving to a friend's house on the night of August 23rd, I was stopped on East 14th by Officer Cam of the uh, Des Moines Police Department, and I believe Mark Moore of the Polk County Sheriff's Department. These officers asked me to get out of the car, search me, cuff me, put me into the back of their vehicle, and proceeded to search my car and my trunk without my permission. When asked why they stopped me and put handcuffs on me, Deputy Moore replied that he ran a cursory search of my license plate while following me. Now, how many times does that happen, that the police run a cursory um, check of your license plate while following behind you? And it supposedly came up that I had a warrant. However, while looking at the screen on the officer's vehicle, it appeared that wasn't a warrant for anything in Polk County, but there was a warrant that appeared for some sort of surrounding counties of Bettendorf. And this was on the screen of the police officer's car, inside the car. Nonetheless, Officer Cam went into my trunk, even though I loudly protested that I didn't give him consent to search my trunk. There was no reason for stopping me other than this cursory check of my license plate. I wasn't driving fast, I had a seatbelt on, I have insurance, I have a car registered, and I have a valid license. And my concern is this: are these officers running cursory checks on everybody? Or are these done on stereotypes? Are these the departments telling the officer to perform warrantless, non-consent searches of people's cars, trunks? Are the departments telling officers to falsely stop and detain people when they have no valid warrant and no valid warrant within Polk County? And I hereby complain and ask your government body to find the answers to the above questions and to make the officers comply with the Fourth Amendment. Can we have can you show the copy of the Fourth Amendment, just so that the viewers can have an understanding of what I'm talking about here? Because we have rights in this country. I mean, this is not China, it's not Russia, and we should, these are cherished rights liberties that we should all enjoy. And the Fourth Amendment, which was created by our country's founders, the first 10 amendments were the Bill of Rights. Fourth Amendment states that the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, I wasn't arrested. I was detained. They did let me go because they figured they had an invalid information, invalid warrant. They shouldn't have stopped me in the first place. And one of the officers whom I was having a conversation with and questioning him on some things had the audacity to say, "Well, you don't tell me how to do my job." Well, somebody needs to. If a taxpaying citizen is and their rights are not being respected, somebody needs to tell the officer how to do their job. Somebody needs to tell the supposed top cop how the officers should be doing their job, because obviously some information is not seeping down from the top. And if you got a top cop and the top cops are not or the rest of the cops are not in line and in keeping with the Constitution, then there's something wrong there. And I would say that the top cop is the top flop. That's what I would say. Um, but, you know, to make matters worse, had another run-in with a cop. His name was Officer Lloyd, 5036. Now, he was kind of evasive on his name, because I told him, I said, well, you know, with your actions, we'll put you on vocal. We'll put your actions on vocal, and we'll talk about your actions and your the way you carry out your duties in a prejudicial manner. Now, I had an incident about a week ago. This was actually about 2 weeks ago with a gentleman at a Midas brake shop. Well, there was some workmanship issues that were in dispute. I drove off, my wheel was loose, went back, had an argument with the guy. Well, this Officer Lloyd, when I'm talking to the mechanic and we're getting this wheel fixed that was left loose on my car. I'm driving down the street and my wheel's loose. Wasn't loose when I drove there to get an oil change. But anyway, the officer appears and just starts yelling, "Hey, hey, hey!" And there's no fighting going on. There was nothing, no blows being exchanged. I was having a conversation. We was talking with the mechanic, and the mechanic was actually getting my tire fixed as it was needed to be back like it was when I got to the shop, because I didn't have tire work done at Midas. I had oil change done at Midas. But anyway, to make a long story short, the officer yelled and argued and briefly detained me, and never once asked me, "Hey, what was going on here?" You know, and it would seem, if you have two parties that are party to a dispute, you would want to talk to both parties. But because I am guilty of being black, I guess, or guilty of not being of his persuasion, I paper regarding this nest. It was on the Des Moines Register, in the Des Moines Register on September 8th. Talks about nests. A 13-member police team created to reduce Central Des Moines' rising crime will disband within the next few weeks, and officers will return to their regular patrols as the weather cools and crime most likely drops, the department spokesman said Friday. Des Moines Police Chief Judy Bradshaw decided this week to send officers back to their usual beats ending what police and many residents consider to be accessible 2-month effort to clamp down on drugs, weapons, and violence. And the task force will disband at an unspecified date, but it could return in another form if problems arise in specific areas. And we're always looking to deal with surge in violent crime, says Sergeant Vince Valdez. Valdez said the department's regular patrol officer will still cover the area in addition to officers from its Metro Tactics Response Unit, Metro Star. It handles high-risk situations, conducts underwater searches, and escorts dignitaries. Police had planned from the onset to disband the NEST program, which borrowed manpower from other departments and forced those officers to carry the extra work. Now, what I feel about NEST is, to young black males in the community, NEST is a pest. They need to go send NEST somewhere else. Judy Bradshaw and her NEST need to go NEST somewhere else. And as for the allegation or the comment in the fallacious comment, I should say, in the City View, that there has been no shooting or anything since there's been, or murders or anything since they formed NEST, I would say that's hogwash. They had people killed over hoppers a few weeks ago when people were shooting outside a club, and then an off-duty police officer shot and killed the man that was shooting. So, that's hogwash. So I think that this whole notion that we can go and turn back the clock to the 60s and 70s and early 80s, where cops could just go around and randomly violate the rights of young blacks, and I should also say socially, social on that social economical level, poor whites as well, or people that happen to be traveling through the hood. If they could just go turn back the clocks, I think that this whole NEST idea is a joke, because they're not doing anything but violating people's rights on a regular basis in the guise of stopping crime. But I have yet to see the crime decrease, and I've yet to see, like they claim, to see all these people with glowing praise on how good a job they're doing. Yeah, sure, they've stepped up their presence, but what did they do this summer when a friend of mine was doing a basketball tournament in the middle of Forest Park, Evelyn Davis Park? We went to the police department and said, well, can we have your presence for this event that we're throwing on for the neighborhood and the kids? We had stuff for the kids right in the neighborhood, Evelyn Davis Park. Activities, we had water balloon, we had we had everything. We had a dunk tank. What did the police department? They wanted us to pay. So when it's time to do real stepping up to show your presence in a positive light in the community, you're not there. But when you want to show your presence in a negative light in the community, you're there. Now that to me is unequal treatment of people in our community. And they just elected an Asian outreach person appointed an Asian outreach person for the police department. Where's the black outreach? There is none there. We've got to pay for it. So that's what I got to say about the top flop, Judy Bradshaw. And I think that something needs to be done about this whole situation. And hopefully some of the other black leaders, so-called leaders, can speak out if they're not afraid of rattling the cage about this matter as well. That's my whole 2 cents. Did you have something on this, John? Or Don?
Okay. Back to your Fourth Amendment, Don. Maybe you can put that up on the screen here. You may remember a fellow that was stopped in the courthouse by a deputy, detained, not only detained, but arrested and jailed on a false case of violation of 719.1, interference with official acts, which means that person had to know that he was interfering, and of course that means he would had to have had some kind of an idea as to what the official acts were that were being interfered with. my point is this. We know that an arrest can only happen when no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be seized, searched, and the person or things to be seized. So basically, no warrants shall issue. Well, he issued an arrest warrant. And it may be of interest to you, Terrance, to know that in a statement made recently by that officer, he said, I didn't know that an oath was required. Now, here's an officer who raised his hand apparently at one time or another to uphold the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Iowa, and his hand being held in the sky, swearing to somebody that he would uphold the Constitution meant diddly squat. Absolutely nothing. And I think when we have situations like that, I think it is a real abandonment of the kinds of things that we expect our police officers, our servants, to be observing. And if they can't do that, step aside,
And
because there's somebody noble in this community who's willing to take your job, right?
I think it's a shame that he would capitulate to those kind of comments that he didn't know, especially since he's sworn to uphold the Constitution. And the Iowa Constitution clearly states, and we've researched this because this is a matter that happened to you, which we actually, well, you actually got off, so which is a good deal because he violated the Constitution and not putting anything under oath on the information that was used to charge you
Correct.
with this supposed offense. And might I add that although I was discussing incidents which happened to me and a lot of African Americans in the community, I have noticed that whites in the community, especially poor whites, have also been the victim of some of these outlandish practices recently. There's been a lot of people I know of. One guy worked for me, matter of fact, had his truck impounded because he had the license plate on the dash of the car during this whole nesting thing. So, this is an honest working guy. He's been working for me for a year and a half. And he has his license plate because he didn't have a screw. He got his license plate on his dash. Well, they stopped him because of this, and they impounded his vehicle. Now, how's a man supposed to work when you take his vehicle when all he's doing is driving around doing service work? But this is the level that we're talking about. And he did happen to be Mexican American, so it happens to all of us in here in the neighborhood. But it just seems like for most it affects blacks and those that appear to be poor whites as well. They make some of these judgments against you. Now back in the days of Sherlock Holmes, a man was judged by a clue.
Hmm.
But like KRS One says, now he's judged by if he's Spanish, black, Italian, or Jew. So that's the kind of thing I'm going at. But it doesn't shake my faith or my confidence, and it's not going to stop me from talking about it and addressing it and continue to shining, because instead of patting me down, they need to wipe me down, because like I told one cop, I said I make more in 6 months than you make all year. So you can do these little things to me and try to put me down and make judgments against me. He talked about my second car. I have a Taurus. And he said, well, that's why you're driving a Taurus. I said, well, you know what? I don't need a flashy car. I don't need rims to make me feel good about who I am and how much I make. You obviously, since you're Sergeant or Officer Lloyd, who's a sawed-off police officer, I think he stands about 5 foot, and he must have a inferiority complex. Um, he has to use his badge and his gun as a means to make himself feel good, and to unfairly treat persons who may be of African American descent. He uses that as a means to make him feel good about himself. But I don't need the flashy cars. I don't need the flashy clothes. I mean, I dress nice, but I don't need all that to feel good about myself. And it's all gone. Everything I feel I got a good thing about karma. Everything comes back around.
Right.
So just like the guy that arrested you, he omitted to sign an oath on the affidavit, and he's now subject to a lawsuit. Um, the guy that I'm talking about, Officer Lloyd, 5036 of the police department, I'm sure bad things may come to pass to happen to him, which is, you know, that's what happens in this world. So don't pat me down, wipe me down. 'Cause,
Well,
that's a hip hop song. So
you don't have to be black to be terrorized, but it helps, right?
right. Well, and I talked to a white gentleman down at the police department.
Sure.
Um, when I went down there to get some information for a complaint, um, he happened to be driving. Uh, he tried to take a shortcut through some road construction area and turned around because he couldn't get through. And he told the cops, I'm sorry, or that wasn't good enough for him. They wanted blood, so they ended up searching his car, impounding his car, and they made him walk to Ankeny. So this whole Nest thing, I mean, they're not doing anything, I think, but trying to get a whole lot of revenue to pad their pockets, because they're impounding people's cars left and right for little or no reason at all.
What's the acronym you were using there? Nest?
Nest. It should be called PEST, because it ain't.
Pest.
They're doing nothing but pestering people.
Okay.
Now, if they want to be out there in the community, they need to be out there at positive events, showing their presence, as well as doing all this negative stuff and stereotyping people and stopping them based on their race or whatever, or performing cursory checks of their license plate based on their race. I've got a plain Jane car for my second car is a Taurus. The year it was made, it was the most popular car. Everybody has a Taurus. So I couldn't think of and I don't like to say, well, gee, it was because I'm black. I don't like to say that, but my experience sometimes in some situations, and I think that I've got a good sense for when that is the case.
Right.
Because I don't see police looking at everybody's license plate.
He mentioned he had the police had to forced him to walk to Ankeny.
Yeah,
It wasn't quite the word you used, but
yeah, they
in another country, the drunks that they pick up and arrest, they're hauled out into the countryside somewhere, I think 10 mile away or something.
yeah,
And
well,
they're dropped off, and they have to walk back without shoes back to town.
well, it's no difference here. I mean, we can't talk about Russia when we have the same kind of stuff happening here. We're supposed to have all these rights. And this guy, he told me, he said, I wasn't drunk. I passed the sobriety test. He said they found an empty can of beer in his car, and they impounded his car.
Wow.
Yeah,
Impounded, and he had to walk back to Ankeny.
walk
for that.
from downtown or like near downtown, north side,
Uh-huh.
where they have all this Nest stuff going on, and had to walk from there to Ankeny.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, at night. So
Wow. Want to thank you for that collection of stories of current events happening right here in this community. I too thought it was great that a lady could be working for the department for 32 years and finally rise to the top post. But I'm wondering the kinds of ideas and everything that she's picked up in those 32 years, if she is appropriately instituting those kinds of things. You see, if we can't get our law enforcement straightened up, if we can't get our courts straightened up, then anything that we do with respect to getting the family straightened up is going to be really tough sell. You see, there are many, many factors that are tearing our families completely apart. And it doesn't help to have law enforcement step in and do those things which simply continue the terroristic policies of the Department of Human Services and others. What is it that causes the biggest disturbance? It isn't drugs. It isn't some of these other things that are causing the disturbance, the breakup of the family. It is financial incentives from the United States Congress. You see, whenever they set up a program and scatter money around, things get warped, out of shape. And states behave in such a way as to maximize the amount of money that they get. Maximizing the amount of money they get and distribute to folks tears the family apart, because the programs are seldom ever put together in such a way as to be constructive for the family. Quite often these programs are destructive. And we'll show you one of those programs. You see, we got into a point where we were passing out welfare, and everybody thought that welfare was a naughty word. Well, basically, welfare is not a naughty word. It means the kind of measured compassion that a organization or a city or state or community should have for its people who are less fortunate. That doesn't mean that you pass out the money without some controls and without some perspectives. But then we decided, well, we're going to get rid of the welfare system. We're going to put these mothers to work. So whether it's a single mother or a married mother or whatever, we're going to take her out of the home. We've already removed the father from the home, basically, and so mother can operate on welfare. Now what we're going to do is to provide incentives so that mother can go to college and that she can get a job. Then she can put her children with publicly assisted daycare, and we can pretty much wipe out the family. Well, something came through to help alleviate that business of welfare. We got rid of welfare and replaced it with something called TANF. TANF, that is temporary assistance to needy families. Cash assistance of 35%, is it? 36%. Other services, I don't know what's included in other services, but that's 24%. Child care, about a fifth of it going for child care. Systems and administration. Now, I wonder why, when all other organizations can operate on 6 to 8% administrative costs, it costs the welfare people 12% to run the business.
What do you mean it costs them 12%? It's given to them.
Well, no, that's what they apportion as part of their budget. They say it takes them 12%.
And who collects that? Who gets paid that systems and administration money?
It would be the higher-ups.
Higher-ups?
Sure. Every time you hire somebody who's a manager or supervisor or even a worker, that's part of systems and administration. It's required because you have such things as eligibility to look out for. You don't want to be handing this money out to people who are not eligible. By the way, eligibility in Iowa means nothing. If there are Mexicans that want to come in and grab these programs, I don't believe that there is a high degree of eligibility scrutiny that is impacting. In fact, that's one of the problems that they're having right now with a program called the CHIP program. That's health care for children, because nobody is watching the eligibility of who is to get CHIP. And if you can do that, of course, you can pass out a lot of money in a short order. Well, CHIP has become a very popular type of program, and they're finding it very difficult to separate the population from a program that has a tremendous amount of impact that is negative. That is, passing it out to people who have no right to it. Don?
So back to that 18% you were talking about going to child care. Do you believe that those parents or mothers get 100% of that 18%?
I would imagine the child care providers would get the 18%
Or
that's set
is
aside.
there a cost to put out the 18% that they keep out of there? It'd be worth looking into, maybe.
Well, this whole TANF idea, the whole idea that you pay people to leave home and to leave their children free to all kinds of neighborhood problems, what we're doing is we're building programs and inefficient, costly programs to remove mom from the home, to remove father from the home, and to expose the children to the unseemly difficulties. Children need supervision, and you say, "Well, my children are old enough; they can watch after themselves." Well, sure, they probably need more supervision when they're 13 and 14 than they did when they were 2. But maybe I'm stretching it there. But the best way to supervise a child is for a mother and a father to be agreed upon how that is to be accomplished, and to give their own time to that supervision. Well, we're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing father separated from the home because mother could go and attach herself to some kind of a welfare program because she had the children. Now we say, well, that's terrible. Welfare is costing us too much. We're going to have to cut back on welfare by having the mother go to work. And so when mother's at work, she's not watching the children. You know that pattern of mom and dad, and big brother, little sister, Puff and Spot was not a bad scheme because it meant that shared responsibility of child care, shared responsibility of earning a living. Generally, in the old days, it was father that went out and earned the living. But the children were being properly supervised. And mom was there to find out what was going on. Now we think we know much, much better, don't we? Well, here's just a brief introduction to TANF. Temporary Assistance for Needy Families is a block grant created by the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996. Don't you marvel at the way they're able to put fancy names on these silly programs? As a part of the federal effort to end welfare as we know it. So we're going to end welfare even if it destroys the family. The TANF block grant replaced the Aided Families with Dependent Children, or AFDC, which had provided cash welfare to poor families with children since 1935. And it's probably a good idea that they undertake some revision of that program. In my opinion, if there's a family that's needy, you'd better supply the money, as we did in 1935, to that family so that mom can stay home and supervise the children. She probably knows better the kind of mischief that her kids get into and what they need in terms of supervision, probably much better than does the government. Well, in this, under the TANF structure, the federal government provides block grants to the states which use these funds to operate their own programs. States can use TANF dollars in ways designed to meet any of the four purposes set out in the federal law. And here's those so-called purposes. And you tell me if you know of any of these purposes that have been met. Number one, provide assistance to needy families so that children can be cared for in their own homes or in the homes of relatives. I've not heard a whole lot of impact that is actually being done. Of course, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of TANF money that's flowing around. Secondly, to end the dependence of needy parents on government benefits by promoting job preparation, work, and marriage. Have you heard a whole lot about promotion of marriage among otherwise welfare families? I've not heard too much about that. And if you have a story, I'd like for you to come onto this program and tell us about the magnificent efforts under TANF to provide that young people get married first, then have children. Then you've got some kind of a commitment and moving in a proper direction so that we don't have to have all of these government handout programs. Prevent and reduce incidence of out-of-wedlock pregnancies and establish annual numerical goals for preventing and reducing the incidence of these pregnancies. And lastly, to encourage the formation and maintenance of two-parent families. What kind of projects have you seen? What kind of anecdotal evidence do you have that TANF, as a government program through block grants to states, has resulted in anything like the encouragement of formation and maintenance of two-parent families? I haven't heard of any.
What does that have to do with the marriage that the judge was performing here a month ago? 2 months ago, maybe?
You'll have to tell me what the marriage was.
Between two men?
Oh.
Or two women?
Yeah.
Is that two-parent families?
I don't think it fits. Okay? Because you're not going to find much procreation, much strengthening of society when you have people like Judge Hanson, who has abandoned the idea of judicial wisdom and has somehow placed in his mind that he is a legislator.
But DHS is procreating children.
Yeah, you bet. States have used their TANF funds in various ways, including income assistance, including wage supplements, child care, education, job training, and transportation, and a variety of other services to help families make transitions to work. See, the whole idea is if you can only get education, then you can get a job, and then you can be strictly on your own. While the single-parent family has a real struggle, and perhaps that single mother or that single father would be better off to stoop to the level of accepting government handouts rather than leaving his or her own children to the terrors of the neighborhood and the high costs that are involved in child care. And by the way, I think the suspicions are much greater and the incidents of child abuse are much greater when the children are outside of the purview of the family. When mom and dad are there watching over things, I think we have a much finer system of security for the children than we would have otherwise. You want to pick up page 2 there in just a moment, Don, and we'll on that chart, and I'll have you read that in just a moment. States have used their TANF monies in various ways, and the law that created TANF, that's the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, block grants authorized funding through the end of the federal fiscal year 2002. Since 2002, Congress has been working on legislation to reauthorize the block grants and make some modifications to the rules and funding levels. I haven't seen the most recent reauthorization. In the meantime, TANF funding has been temporarily extended several times. Who is eligible for TANF funded benefits? Well, states have broad discretion to determine who will be eligible for TANF funded benefits and services. The main federal requirement is that states use funds to serve families with children. The state can set different eligibility tests for different programs funded by TANF block grants. For an example, a state could choose to limit TANF cash assistance caseloads and significantly in the first 5 years and overall the number of single parents who now work has risen markedly. Researchers generally agree that a combination of factors led to the reduced caseload and increased employment rates, including strong economy, state welfare to work efforts, and other TANF-related policies, and strengthened work supports, such as expanded earned income tax credit, increased availability of child care assistance, and improved child support collections. Try it from there, Don.
I missed. Where you're on the second paragraph? Go to the third. Okay.
Studies of families.
Studies of families that stop receiving TANF income assistance shows that at any point, about 60% of former welfare recipients are employed, while 40% are not. Those who work generally earn low wages and often remain poor. In a review of studies of families who left welfare and are working, the Center for Law and Social Policy found that working former recipients tended to earn between $6 and $8.50 an hour. Many families left welfare not because they found a job, but because they were terminated from the program for failing to comply with requirements, such as the work requirements. Research has shown that many of these families experience barriers to employment that likely impede their ability to meet the state's expectations. These barriers include mental and physical impairments, substance abuse, domestic violence, low literacy or skill levels, learning disabilities, having a child with a disability, and problems with housing, child care, or transportation. Many families with barriers to employment remain in TANF, and one of the challenges in the years ahead will be to help them overcome those barriers so they can succeed in the workforce. Overall, state TANF programs now provide cash assistance to less than half of the families who meet the eligibility requirements. A recent report from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services shows that just 48% of families who are poor enough to qualify for TANF cash assistance and who meet the other eligibility requirements receive that assistance. In some cases, families are in deep poverty because the parents are jobless and the family does not receive income assistance or welfare to work services from state TANF programs. As cash assistance caseloads fell sharply in the early years of TANF, some federal TANF funds went unspent. As states adjusted to the broader purposes of TANF, they redirected the freed up resources that previously went to pay cash benefits into programs that provide supports to low-income working families, particularly child care, as well as into welfare to work programs. These unspent TANF funds, which states had built up in the first several years of TANF implementation, had dwindled. Data from the Treasury Department shows that states have reduced their overall TANF spending from $19.4 billion in 2003 to $17.4 billion in 2005. The erosion in the purchasing power of these funds due to inflation will make the impact even more severe. As states have been forced to scale back their use of TAMP funds, they have made cuts in a number of programs, including child subsidies for low-income working families and programs designed to help parents move from welfare to work. Unless Congress provides substantial new TAMP or child care resources in reauthorization legislation, states will have little choice but to make further cuts in their programs in the years ahead. As inflation continues to erode the value of these funding sources, the impact of time limits, another key element of the 1996 law, is still unclear. Families are now only starting to reach their federal time limit, and states with shorter time limits have granted a variety of extensions and exemptions. In many states, a large share of the families affected by the same limits were working families who had been receiving cash assistance to supplement their low earnings. Finally, the 1996 welfare law also included as goals reducing non-marital pregnancies and encouraging the formation of two-parent families. Teen pregnancy and non-marital birth rates did fall in the 1990s, and the proportion of low-income children living in two-parent families. It is unclear how much, if at all, TAMP policies affected these trends. TAMP cash assistance to very poor families, but provide TAMP-funded child care or transportation assistance to working families with somewhat higher incomes. An exception to the broad flexibility that states generally have to establish TAMP eligibility rules is that federal law bars states from using several TAMP dollars to assist more legal immigrants until they have been in the U.S. for at least 5 years. This restriction applies not only to income assistance, but also to TAMP-funded work supports and services such as child care, transportation, and job training. A significant percentage of poor children have non-citizen parents who are ineligible for TAMP benefits and services. States can use state MOE funds to provide benefits to recent immigrants, but fewer than half do so. Prior to the 1996 welfare law, legal immigrants generally were eligible for benefits, although the income of an immigrant's sponsor was factored in for the first 3 years. Two other key elements of state TAMP programs are work requirements and time limits, both of which apply to basic assistance, income and other assistance designed to meet basic ongoing needs. Federal law requires that half of the families who receive assistance under TAMP must be engaged in some kind of work-related activity for at least 30 hours a week. States get credits for reduced caseloads, however, and are currently effectively required to have much less than half of families engaged in federally defined church work activities.
Okay, we'll cut it off there on our presentation of the problems with TANF funds. You want to give us a phone number up here, and we want to say thank you for dropping by. We trust that this discussion may have been helpful to you. We want to talk a little more about the whole idea of the kind of support we're getting from government now for our families. Not a whole lot. Here's the telephone numbers that may be helpful to you as you deal with DHS.